My head's killing me right now. Hi guys, I am here with a story for you guys out of my Dreams and Miracles book by Anne Spengler. As always, these are true stories. Story tonight is going to be One More Visit by Kathryn Hillis. And as always, I will start off by reading you guys the introduction. Kathryn Hillis of Melbourne, Florida, had resigned her university teaching job to care for her son Kenny full-time. She tells of her heartbreaking loss and the comfort that came one Christmas Eve. And now we'll get into Kathryn's story. My 3-year-old son Kenny held tight to my hand as he released a red balloon into the chill air that Christmas afternoon. "Do you think Jesus will like his birthday gift, Mommy?" he asked. "I'm sure of it, darling," I said, squeezing his hand. As I watched the balloon drift up into the sky, I asked, "Please, God, don't take Kenny from me. Not yet." My son had been born with a serious heart defect. He'd already had 2 heart attacks, and the doctor told me he probably wouldn't make it past the age of 5. Some days I prayed for a miracle cure. Other days, when Kenny's lips turned blue just from the exertion of climbing into my lap, I held him close and simply prayed for more time. Another month, another year, another Christmas. Kenny was the center of my life. I'd left my university teaching job to be with him full-time, looking after him by myself while my husband Steve was at work. There was scarcely a moment when Kenny's face wasn't in my sight, his voice within earshot. I carried him with me while I did housework, gave him oxygen from a portable tank when he needed it, took him to all his medical appointments. One evening in February, I drove Kenny home from the doctor's office. The cold wind stung my eyes as I carried him inside. I set him down in the living room to work on his favorite seascape puzzle and went into the kitchen to see Steve. I was talking to a woman at the doctor's office today whose friend's son had the same condition as Kenny. I told him, trying to keep my voice low. The boy died when he was just 4. No, I don't want to die," Kenny cried, running into the kitchen. I scooped him up in my arms. He gasped for breath. "Not you, darling, not you," I said, burying my face in his soft blonde hair. "I was talking about another boy. Mommy's going to take care of you," I said, as Steve put his arms around us both. That night, when I tucked Kenny into bed, he looked so small and scared. He blew me a kiss, then a second one, just like always, and closed his eyes. I sat with him a long time, trying to imprint his features in my mind. His breaths came quick and shallow. Comfort him, Lord. When he woke the next morning, I picked him up and gave him a big hug. "Mommy, I had a dream about a lady," he said. "She was this big," he lifted up his arms over his head, "and had a long white dress and wings like the one in our picture." Steve and I had a painting of an angel in our room that Kenny loved. "She picked me up to take me on a ride. Then I woke up." He stopped and looked at me, his eyes wide and serious. "But if she really came to take me for a ride, I'd come back, 'cause you'd be lonely." "I love you, Mommy," he said, reaching his arms around my neck. "I love you too, my snuggly bear," I said. Maybe if I just hold him, I thought, then no one can take him from me. Suddenly, Kenny's body stiffened. He groaned deeply, grinding his teeth, and then fell limp in my arms. "Steve!" I screamed. "Kenny's having an attack!" There was no ambulance service in our Royal Missouri town, so Steve grabbed the oxygen tank and we jumped into the car. I administered the oxygen, but Kenny remained pale and unresponsive across my lap. Tossing the mask aside, I bent over to breathe air through my son's dark blue lips. The car jostled as Steve sped down the gravelly road toward the doctor's office. "Don't leave me, Kenny," I whispered between breaths. "Don't leave me." At the doctor's office, Kenny was taken from my arms and rushed into another room. I sank into a chair, my head in my hands, listening to the doctor and nurses work on my son. At last it was quiet, and I felt Steve touching my shoulder. Slowly I raised my head and met our doctor's eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "We couldn't save him this time." We went home to the silence I had dreaded for so long. After a week, Steve went back to work. There was nothing for me to do but ask God how He could take away my son. The emptiness inside me was so vast, I felt I might lose myself in it forever. "Maybe you could go back to teaching," Steve suggested gently, but I couldn't deal with the thought of being around strangers. Even Steve and I trudged through our grief separately. There was no purpose left to my life. I didn't have to get up to make breakfast for Kenny or go to the library for new books to read to him. What use were arms without Kenny to carry? All I could do was think about him. Week after week I stared out the window but saw nothing of the passing seasons, only the images that played like a film reel in my mind from the moment I woke to when I fell into yet another dreamless sleep. Kenny blowing bubbles, licking frosting off a spoon, crawling under the covers with me, and always, always, like a soundtrack, there was his promise. "I'd come back 'cause you'd be lonely. I love you, Mommy." When it was the holidays again, the streets stirred with light and color. The heavy scent of pine hung in the air. At home, the Christmas boxes remained in the garage. I couldn't bear to see the paper nativity figures Kenny had cut out the year before for ornaments. "You have taken everything from me, God," I thought. "How can I celebrate the birth of your son when my son is gone forever?" On Christmas Eve night, I had a dream. I looked up, and Kenny was walking toward me, holding the hand of an angel. She looked like the one from his dream, with a long white gown and wings. Her hair was the same curly blonde as Kenny's, and her face shone as she smiled at me. Kenny let go of her hand and ran to me. Ran. He wasn't breathless at all, and his lips were a healthy red. I took him into my arms and settled him on my lap. I stroked his hair, kissed his cheeks, hugged him close. Then he reached up to cup my face in his hands. "I love you, Mommy," he said. "I told you I would come back." The angel reappeared. "No, just a little longer," I thought. "Please." How could I give him up again? At last, Kenny pulled away. I wanted to go after him, but I could only sit there with my arms outstretched. Kenny ran to the angel and clasped her hand tightly, and all at once I knew I could trust my son to her, that she was taking him to the only one who could care for him better than I. As they walked away, Kenny turned and blew me a kiss, then another, and was gone. When I awoke, the air felt warm, almost electric. The dream, instead of fading, grew more vivid in my memory. It was like a touch from God, guiding me back to the one thing that could fill the emptiness inside me. His love, the love he'd shown me by giving me Kenny for a few precious years, and by letting me visit with him one more time. I went out into the cool Christmas morning and looked up at the sky, imagining my son's red balloon still floating high among the clouds. "I love you, Kenny," I said. I knew somewhere, safe in God's embrace, he was blowing me 2 kisses. And that was Kathryn's story. One more visit. I hope you guys enjoyed Kathryn's story, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your night. Bye, guys. God bless.